have you ever tried to give someone advice and yet you knew that they just wouldn't take it? And did that ever happen? Even before you gave it, you're just like, yeah, I know I need to give this person advice, but it's hard, right? It's hard to give people advice when you know they're not going to take it. In fact, there's a word for this. When you're giving somebody advice and you're pretty sure they won't take it, you know what the word is? Nagging. Right? Anyway, sorry. But I have good news for every one of us, though, and that is this. That there is one person that you can give advice to that you actually can control exactly how they will react to your advice, right? And you know who that is? Yeah, it's yourself, right? It's you, not me. It's not me, it's you, right? Okay. But so that's why we called this series Dear Future Me, because the best person, the very best person for you to give advice to is you. For me to give advice to is me. And so what we're doing through this series is we're saying, hey, self, hey, mirror, I want to help you make this year better. And we're looking at the book of Proverbs, and we're learning from this. And so what I want to do today is actually, we're going to look at the first 7 verses of Proverbs chapter 1, and we're going to see how kind of these 31 chapters are governed, okay, and how they work, how this wisdom thing works. So chapter 1, verse 1 just starts this way. It says, these are the Proverbs of Solomon, David's son, king of Israel. Their purpose, here's the purpose of 31 chapters of the Bible. Okay, their purpose is to teach people wisdom and discipline to help them understand the insights of the wise. So let's just talk about these 2 words, wisdom and discipline, for a while. Because really, those 2 words are the hinges on which this whole 31 chapters of wisdom moves. So we need to really grasp what these 2 words are. So what's wisdom? Well, wisdom is not just knowing things, not just knowing information or how things work, but wisdom is actually applied knowledge. Okay? It's putting into practice knowledge that we have. Making a difference. So wisdom actually has this really amazing ability to influence our reality, to influence our own future. It's the idea that it's not just knowing about life, it's the idea that you can actually change your life. You can actually grow or improve or make changes so that you don't actually have to experience exactly the same things you're experiencing now. You don't have to go around the same mountains again and again and again and again. You don't just have to say, wow, that's just life. That's just the way it is. That's just how it's going to be. That's not how it has to be. You can actually conquer whatever mountain it is that you're facing. Not to say that you won't have more mountains, right, that need conquering. So I'm not saying that, wow, now your life is just going to be this, everything's just going to go smooth. No. There's going to be challenge after challenge after challenge, but you don't have to just live your whole life with the exact same challenges. And that actually keeps life fresh. It keeps life adventurous. It keeps life exciting. And the big shift it does for us when we have wisdom is that we stop feeling like a victim of life. Because you see, the reality is life is happening to us. Okay? We're caught up in the stream of time. We're caught up in the stream of life happening. And so we feel this sense of, well, life's just kind of taking place and I'm moving through it. And what can start to happen is we can start to lose the sense of any control of what's taking place. Sometimes we call it fatalism, right? Rather than personal responsibility. What wisdom says I don't have to live that way. Actually, people who go through major tragedies or major suffering, one of the things that they talk about is they'll say, it's really important that you get a hold of this idea, and instead of thinking of yourself as a victim, okay, to the tragedy or the suffering, the difficulties, reverse that and think of yourself as a survivor, okay? So what's the difference between a victim and a survivor? They go through the same things. A victim primarily views life as having acted upon them. Okay, these things have been done to me. A survivor is focused on their response to what has been happening. So rather than just thinking about what has been enacted to me, I think about my action, right? How I am responding. And people who go through, Viktor Frankl, the guy who wrote about Nazi concentration camps and did a lot of reflecting on that. He said the last of one's human freedoms is to choose one's attitude, to choose our response in the midst of any given circumstance. Or the way Chuck Swindoll famously said it, he said, life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you and I respond to it, right? So I'm not just a victim of fate. With wisdom, we believe that we can be responsible for our outcomes. Now, it's a little bit scary to accept that, because then rather than blaming in our lives, we have to say, well, I'm responsible, right? I'm responsible for my own success or my own failure. But the Bible actually keeps pushing us exactly there, okay? It'll say things like this: you have freedom. You've been given freedom, but you need to walk in that freedom. Or it'll say you have a purpose, but you have to fulfill that purpose. You have a responsibility, right, to walk in, to fulfill, to step into the paths that are available to you. And maybe the most vivid way it says it in all the Bible is just where God brings his people before him and he says, choose for yourselves this day. You get to pick blessing or cursing. You choose. Wow, right? That's pretty straightforward. And actually, that's exactly where the book of Proverbs brings us again and again and again and again. In fact, Proverbs is so bold about this, and there's so many verses about it. I had to pick one or two here, but this is Proverbs 9:24. If you become wise, you, right? It's up to you. You become wise. If you do, and that's a big if, right? You will be the one to benefit. Or if you scorn wisdom, you say, whatever, right? You will be the one to suffer. So, up to you. Benefit, blessing, or suffering. Up to you. And I could take you to proverb after proverb that says this exact thing. There's blessing, there's cursing. And then, chapter 19, verse 3, people ruin their lives by their own foolishness. Then they get angry at God, right? Actually, verse 8 of the same chapter says, to acquire wisdom is to love yourself. Right? It's just like, it's up to you, but I'll tell you, if you acquire wisdom, you're loving you. You're gonna be the one to benefit if you do that. So Proverbs just offers this very simply. It just keeps going. Here's how life works. Here's how life works. Here's how life works. In fact, after chapter 9 in Proverbs, so there's kind of a turning point in chapter 9. After chapter 9, from chapter 10 all the way to 31, just a huge chunk of it is just principle after principle after principle after principle. It just goes. In fact, we call them couplets. It says, like, if you go like this, then you'll have these results. If you go like that, you'll have these results. It just goes, if this, then this. If this, then that. And just keeps repeating, here's how life works. And it doesn't really apologize for it. It just kind of says, take it or leave it, but these are the principles, and they're not changing, right? So you can live by them or not by them, but, if you do this, you'll get that. If you do that, you'll get these results, And if you want things to go well, then go this way. If you want things to go terrible, go that way. If you want success or failure, and so on. And so if you want different outputs in your life, then you have to change your inputs, right? You have to change what we're doing right now if we want something different into the future. And again, that crazy thing about wisdom, this is what wisdom is that you actually can do that. You can actually change your own reality, your own future by implementing wisdom. But wisdom isn't just knowing the right thing to do, right? It's applying that. It's that doing piece, which is why that next word is so important, right? It's for the purpose is to teach people wisdom and discipline, right? Discipline. And the idea of discipline is that I can examine my own life, any part of it. You can do the same. We can take marriage or relationships or our job or our health or our finances or our walk with God. You can take any area of your life, and wherever you and I don't like the outputs, wherever we don't like what we're seeing in our lives, we can do things that will change inputs, that will sow seeds now for a different future, for a different harvest into the future. So that's the encouragement of Proverbs, to get wisdom and discipline. All right, and if you do that, so this is the way I like to define discipline. Discipline is giving up something now for something I want more later. All right, I'm going to give up something now because I've got something I want more later, or I'm going to do something now so I can have something more later. The way we taught it to our kids when they were young was we said, listen, you can play now and pay later, or you could be wise and pay now and then play later. And here's the deal. If you play now and pay later, you'll always play less and pay more. But if you pay now and play later, everybody following me still? Okay. Then you'll pay less and you'll get to play more, right? Woo, this is a great deal. So wisdom just says, hey, discipline, right? Change your inputs right now and you'll see things out. The challenge is, discipline's hard. It's a present sacrifice for a future reward. It gives up something I want now because I have something I want more. So there's a toughness to it. There's this, it lacks immediacy, right? Discipline is about something into the future. So in the moment, I actually suffer a little bit. It actually hurts. There's something painful there. And as human beings, we have this sort of desire for immediate gratification. We have, of course, a dislike of anything that takes away our comfort. We prefer the easy path, sort of the downhill thing. We don't like confronting our own inadequacies, our own weaknesses, our own sin. We actually like our sin. That's why we do it, right? We don't like the results of it, but we like it. And so discipline encourages us towards this hard work piece or this energy piece, the investment side of the equation, so that we can get the right thing on the other side. Or maybe I could say it this way. Do you know what discipline sounds like? Discipline sounds like this. Right? That's what discipline sounds like. And that you know, you kind of at first you're like, oh, I don't know if I want discipline then. But John Maxwell says it this way. He says, everything worthwhile in life is uphill. Everything worthwhile. And what happens is when you start to really grasp this, what happens is you look at discipline differently. In fact, anybody who becomes successful at anything will grasp this, right? If you talk to somebody who's been married for 30 years and they've got a really happy marriage, ask them, was that easy? Right? They'll be like, no. Or at least 99.9% of them, right? I mean, there's always an exception. That's what we love to do. When we don't want to do discipline, we think of the exceptions, right? And there always is exceptions. We have exceptions in our own lives. There's exceptions in other people's lives. And so we love to do that, right? We're like, oh, but there's an exception. Listen, the exception doesn't change the rule. It proves it, right? It just goes, yeah, so it's a rule. Because if the exception was the rule, then it wouldn't be an exception. It would just be the way it is. Anyway, so Proverbs just says, well, here's the principle and here's the result. And we go, yeah, but there's an exception. And Proverbs goes, oh, of course there's exceptions. But that doesn't change the rule. The rule's still the rule. And if you break the rule, you break you, right? So it's up to you, but don't use the exception as an excuse to not do the right thing. Okay, so the way Jordan Peterson says it, he says, you have to go where you don't want to go to get to where you do want to go, right? There's that's what discipline is. The price to pay to become great at anything. So my son a while back was doing this workout piece, and building muscles and all this stuff. And, if a guy works out pretty hard, a day or two later, you feel it, right? There's some pain. How many of you have ever felt that before? Just think back, way back, right? A few years ago. Yeah. So I always say, every once in a while I feel like exercising, so what I do is I sit down until the feeling goes away, right? It's like, whew, okay. So, but anyway, if you think way back to when those muscles hurt, and this is what I told my son when he was experiencing it, he's like, oh man, my arms are killing, my muscles are killing. I go, that right there, that is the feeling of growth. That's what that feeling is. And if you can train your mind to think that way, it changes it. It's what, again, I could pick so many proverbs that say this, but to learn, you must love discipline. It is stupid to hate correction. So we have to train our heart, train our mind to actually love discipline. It's the same thing, parents, and this is real important with schooling. If we can teach our kids that moment when your brain hurts, right? Because you're learning something. So your brain is just and it feels like it's turning to mush, and you're working on that math problem, and you're struggling with it. That moment, that's the feeling of growth. That moment when you're working on that English essay, and the words aren't coming, and or you're working on your sermon, a crazy thing, right? And it won't come through for you, and you're just, come on. And that's the feeling of growth. And when you grasp that, then you go, wow, that's how we move forward in life. That's how we make progress. We press through these right inputs to build the muscles that will take us to where we need to go. And anyway, that's the way discipline works. And if you ask anybody in any area of their life, was it easy if they're successful? The answer, of course, is no. But is it worth it? Then I'll go, oh, of course. And people who are sort of world leaders in various areas who've really, really disciplined themselves, they'll talk a lot about their love-hate relationship with discipline and how it's been such a key or critical factor for them. So we can all work on this and learn this. And that's one of the reasons why Proverbs is so big on learning to love and value and be passionate about wisdom, because you have to love wisdom enough to pay the price for it, right? So it's got to be big enough for us that we want it enough, we're hungry enough for it, that we want it more than we want our comfort or our ease or our sin or whatever things are holding us back. Okay, so where are we at? Verse 2? This is verse 3. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined, there's that word again, and here's a new word, and successful lives, to help them do what is right and just and fair. So here it is. Input, output, disciplined and successful, right? So if I live a disciplined life, you can pick any area of your life for this. Your spiritual life, your financial life, your relational life, your educational life, your sports life, your personal life, your emotional life. You pick any area and you just go, okay, if I discipline, input, output, right? And Proverbs is not shy about talking about the goal of success. In fact, especially in these first 9 chapters of Proverbs, you're going to just over and over again, you're going to see Proverbs promise you the benefits of wisdom, the benefits of living a disciplined life. And just again and again, it'll say things like this. You want to be rich? Well, I don't know. Should I want to be rich? Is that allowed to want to be rich? I mean, is that even in the Bible? You read through Proverbs again and again and again. It just says, here's the path to riches. Here it is. Or you want to enjoy honor? You want to be honored? You want to have pleasure? You want delight? Do you want joy? Do you want peace? Do you want freedom? Do you want abundance? Do you want fulfilled living? Do you want a satisfying life? Proverbs is not shy. 31 chapters of here is how to have a good life, right? How successful living. And it just lays out the path toward that. And of course, the path is a godly path. And it's a path of doing. I love that word do right there. What is right and just and fair. So there's an action to it. Okay, so verses 4 to 6 say these proverbs will give insight to the simple, knowledge and discernment to the young. So now we've got the simple and the young being directed to. But here's the interesting thing. Sometimes we think, well, once I'm elderly and wise, I won't need these proverbs. But look what it says. Let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser. And let those with understanding, what? Share it with everybody else? It says, let those with understanding receive guidance by exploring the meaning in these proverbs and parables, the words and riddles of the wise. And here's the deal. Again, the whole idea of wisdom isn't sort of a place you attain. Like, okay, now I've attained wisdom. I got there. I got all this wisdom. Now I'm in the place of wisdom. No, the whole idea of wisdom is this journey of growth. That the wise person isn't the person who has all the wisdom in the world or all this sort of, memorized all the principles of Proverbs. You memorized 31 chapters, now you got all the principles. Now that's not the wise person. The wise person is the person who's examining their life, learning the principles, making changes in their life, and now investing in a new way. Do you see that? There's growth involved. That's why you can have people who are quite young, who are stopped changing, and they actually seem kind of tired and old, right? And you can have somebody who's quite elderly, but who's still learning and growing and gaining wisdom. And they still got this youthfulness about them. Right? Because wisdom isn't so much about attaining to a place as it is about, okay, what else can I learn? Where can I grow? Where can I make changes in my life? How can I make those changes? And we continue on to develop. This is Proverbs 26:12. There is more hope for fools than for people who think they are wise. Right? So the path to wisdom isn't to think I have wisdom. It's to realize how little wisdom I have. And keep inviting more wisdom into my life. Fools think their own way is right. The wise listen to others. So I don't have to arrive there. I have to keep growing and learning and building that continuous growth. And then verse 7, this kind of finishes up the introduction to the book of Proverbs. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge. So we put God first, and we actually talked about that the last 2 weeks in a row. We listen to God, we fear God, wisdom starts there. But fools, look, despise wisdom and discipline. That's the very thing we've been learning about, right? Wisdom and discipline. So we can either value it highly or we can despise it. You could actually say this the other way around. Wise people value wisdom and discipline, or So anyway, so the opposite would be to despise it. The other side would be, I'm going to get a hold of this. And this is what happens for the 9 chapters of this beginning of Proverbs. These 9 chapters, this theme of just valuing and loving and laying a hold of wisdom and discipline and learning how to gain it is talked about again and again and again. These themes just keep getting repeated and repeated and repeated. Because after chapter 9, it's going to give you just one pithy saying after another, one important proverb after another. But he knows there's no point in giving you those proverbs if you're not going to listen to them, right? You ever tried to tell somebody something, giving somebody advice when you knew they wouldn't listen? So he knows you got to get these first 9 chapters right first. And these 7 verses do a great job of summarizing those 9 chapters. This might be a good sort of description of what those 9 chapters say. Getting wisdom, this is chapter 4, verse 7. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment. If you prize wisdom, she'll make you great, and you will have a long and good life. Wow, that would be fantastic. So how do I do that? Let me give you 3 things with the time that remains that will help us do that. And they've already been hinted at here, but we'll lay them out. These would be kind of the paths of wisdom or the postures of gaining wisdom. And the first one is to develop a heart of humility, right? We shouldn't be impressed with our own wisdom. Instead, we fear the Lord. We turn away from evil. This is a willingness to see our own faults, right? We go, man, I'm willing to look in the mirror. I'm willing to take responsibility for my own junk. I'm willing to say, here's the changes that I could make and that I need to make. And I go, and that's what wise people do. Wise people are willing to face that stuff. Wise people are willing to look through their lives and take responsibility. Instead of just blaming, instead of just being a victim, they can take responsibility. So they say, man, I've still got so much to learn. And this is one of my favorite things, and you'll see this as you see these 3 things, but one of my favorite things is to find people who've grown up maybe in very difficult situations where wisdom was not part of their foundations in living. I mean, isn't it a wonderful advantage that some kids have or some people have? They grow up in environments where wisdom is just taught them right from an early age. I mean, that's beautiful. But one of my favorite things is to meet people who haven't had that, but who chase wisdom anyway, right? They have this humility about them. They have this capacity about them that just goes, I'm learning, I'm gaining, I'm developing. And they're everywhere they go, they're asking questions and learning and inviting wisdom into their life and making changes all over their life. And then the flip side of that is real sad, right? Sometimes you meet people who have all this wisdom available to them. They have this amazing upbringing of wisdom, and yet they stagnate at some point. right? They can use that wisdom. I mean, usually it's real helpful for them. But at some point, they just kind of go, meh, I'm wise enough. I got this. And that's always sad to see. So developing that heart of humility and keeping that heart of humility all the way through, that's the first path. The second way to get wise is to become a hungry listener. Okay? Wise people are listeners. So they hold to their own ideas quite carefully, quite tentatively, open-handedly, and they've got this idea that they're always learning, always making adjustments. James says, if you lack wisdom, ask God. He gives it liberally. And again, this is actually the last 2 weeks, this is what we talked a lot about, was the start of wisdom is having an ear open to God, right? Making sure that we've blocked out enough space and time and energy and blocked out other voices, right? The voices of foolishness, the voices of self, and so on, so that I can listen to God and put God first. But there's another place that we can listen to gain wisdom, and that is to experience. Or maybe I could say it this way, listen to life. It actually says, Proverbs chapter 1, verse 20. It says, wisdom is shouting in the streets. She's raising her voice in the public squares. Wisdom is just going, hello, hello, right? And you know where wisdom is doing that shouting? Everywhere. Everywhere you look, everywhere you go. Wisdom is going, hello, hello, hello. And the deal is you're like, well, I never heard it. I never got any wisdom. I never knew. You know what it actually says right after that? Wisdom is shouting in the street. She's raising her voice. It says, if you ignore it and you go down your own path, wisdom will come walking by and say, told you, as you're suffering there on the ground. Oh, wisdom just told you. And you're like, when did you tell me, wisdom? Wisdom goes, I've been shouting the whole time. But you got to listen. And this is this amazing capacity, right? That we can actually step back, work on our lives, not just in our lives, reflect on life, and we can learn. So you look at your successes and your failures. You look at your experiences. Especially look at pain. Pain is a wonderful teacher, right? It's a hard teacher, but it's a wonderful teacher. So we learn. I love the way Pastor Wayne Cordero talks about it. He says, if you walk into a wall and you bump your nose, you ever walked into a wall and bumped your nose? Whoa, right? That's painful. You're like, ugh. The idea is if you do that once, learn from it, right? Don't do it again, right? Now, if you keep walking into the wall, something's wrong, right? Go around, do something else. Just stop and go, wall hard, nose soft, This hurts, right? And then, go through the door or whatever. And you're like, yeah, but there's exceptions. Once in a while I walked into the wall and it was a mirage and I actually just walked right through it. Like, yeah, but still, the principle's the principle. If you walk into walls, you'll hurt your nose, okay? That's the principle. So learn, we learn from our pain. And the cool thing is that wisdom of God has actually been woven into the fabric of the world he created. This is a really cool thing. Proverbs chapter 8, there's this great section. It just says, I was there when the world was created, and God wove me into all of the ways of the world. So all the principles, all of the character of God and the way that the life works is woven into the world so that when you work with God, when you live a godly life, life works with you. All creation works with you. You're working with the grain. Now, not perfectly. There's still exceptions, right? There's still little gnarls and knots in the wood. But in general, you ever done woodworking where you worked against the grain? It's almost impossible, right? You're like, and things chip out and jerk and nothing works. You can't even get started. And that's the way our lives are sometimes. You got an area of your life where it's just, this is not working for me. Well, stop. Step back and go, am I working with the grain or against the grain? Right? Am I using the principles with which God made the world? You know what I was shocked by as I've been doing this study of Proverbs? The last 3 months I've been studying Proverbs for this series. I've read 10 books on the book of Proverbs, and I've read the book of Proverbs, I don't know, at least 100 times, and gone through every single verse. I've categorized them all. I've done a lot of hours of studying on this, and I got all these notebooks full of all these pages. You know what the biggest shock to me was? The amount of times godly and wicked or righteous and evil are repeated in Proverbs. Because before this, I've primarily seen Proverbs as almost a secular book. Like, here's the principles, here's how the world works, take it or leave it. But actually, the way the world works is with godliness. Like, God wove his nature, his character into our world. And so, if you want to know what the wise thing to do is, do the godly thing. Do the thing that fits with the nature and the character and the heart of God, and you'll be doing the wise thing. And it's amazing how much godliness fits together. And actually, you get this added bonus that gets repeated over and over in Proverbs. When you do the godly thing, not only does wisdom work for you, but the very presence of God works for you too. You get this added bonus of the favor of God or the blessing of God upon obedience. It's pretty cool. So anyway, we can learn as we go through life. We get these experiences, we learn from them. But then there's this really neat piece that gets added to learning from life's experience, and that is that we can also learn from other people's experiences. And this is really cool. You don't have to go through everything yourself to learn it. Did you know that? You don't have to, you don't have to walk into walls to know that they'll hurt your nose, right? You can just find somebody with a broken nose and just be like, hey, what happened? Right? And this is so amazing that we can actually learn from each other's pain, from each other's experiences, from each other's. In fact, this is what elderly people will often tell us. This is like, I'm getting older now, and I'm looking at young people. I'm like, I could save you so much pain, right? Don't make the same mistakes I made, right? Because man, we know, right? We've been through some things. And this is so cool. You don't have enough years in your life to learn all the wisdom you're going to need the hard way, right? So how are you going to get all that wisdom? Don't do it the hard way. Just learn from others. Learn from godly people, right? People who've learned God's wisdom, learn from their own experience and from other people, and you can get hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years of experience just by listening to godly advice. And this is what Proverbs pleads with us to do over and over again. Listen to your father and mother's instruction. Listen to godly advice. Don't follow the path of the wicked, right? And over time, you'll glean all this wisdom. You'll learn all these lessons that you don't have to learn by experience. Experience is a great teacher, but it's not the best one. Other people's experience is a way better teacher. Way less painful teacher. It's awesome. Okay, and then just last thought, and we've already talked lots about it, but we develop a heart of humility, we become a hungry listener, and then we build a love of discipline. People who accept discipline are on the pathway to life, and people who ignore correction go astray. So this is what we do. We long for, we invite correction in our lives. We invite people to say, hey, you could do better at this. You could change that. This could have gone better. And here's what I find, and I tell all the people that I mentor this. I probably won't do a lot of correcting in your life unless you ask for it. Because there's something wonderful when a person asks for that correction or asks for that improvement. It just gives you way more permission. On Sundays I preach. In between the services, I go to our communicators. I go to Pastor Barry. I go to my wife and sometimes one or two other people. And I just ask, anything I should do different? Now, I'm not asking what was awesome about the sermon. I don't need to hear that right now. I'm in between the services, and I want to make changes, improvements. And actually, I do the same after the second service, too, just because I want to learn things, right? But it makes it so much easier to hear the improvements that people think I could make if I invite it. If somebody just comes up to me after a service, try this sometime, says, Pastor S, here's something you really need to fix. I mean, it's like, whoa, I'm kind of vulnerable right now, right? But when it's invited, and this is what wise people do, you invite critique, you invite correction. You actually love a rebuke. Isn't that crazy? But that's what wise people do. They long for it. They're looking in their lives. They're like, because I want to get better. I want to improve. I want to learn. I want to change inputs so that I can get better outputs, right? So we're going around saying, teach me, help me learn. And does it sting? Of course it stings, right? That's discipline. Discipline has that element to it. But I want to grow. I want to learn. So those are the paths of wisdom, the way to get wise, and no matter our age. But as we grow in wisdom, we're choosing those blessings. We're choosing that success in whatever given area it is in our lives. And it doesn't make our circumstances perfect, but it does make our response better in whatever circumstance we face. So that's the heart of Dear Future Me. Hey, future me, get wiser and wiser and wiser. That's the wisest thing you can do. And that will actually make your life more of a joyful adventure instead of just kind of going around the same mountain again and again. Why don't we stand? We'll close in prayer.